Through the first quarter of the season, how have the New Orleans Saints fared so far? What will they look like after the bye week? And how the injured players returning help to make them better? We got all that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? Welcome into a special Thursday episode here on Locked On Saints, your daily podcast covering the New Orleans Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much, as always, for making us your first listen of the day every day. Remember that we're available free and on all platforms, including on YouTube. I'm your host, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola on Twitter, Canal Street Chronicles, Locked On NFL, and here with you every single Monday through Friday on Locked On Saints. Usually on these Thursdays, we're doing crossover Thursdays, but with it being the bye week, I wanted to take a look at how the New Orleans Saints have fared so far, what's coming up next for them, and how the players returning help to make them better. So let's start off with where the New Orleans Saints are right now. Are they, we'll start over on the offensive side, a good offense or a bad offense? And there are a lot of things that tell you differently depending upon what it is that you're looking at. Do you value scoring or do you value yardage? I myself value scoring. That's what wins the game. The team with the most yards is not the one that wins their matchups, but the team with the most points always does, no exception. So the way that I look at this, we can start off with the passing offense. The New Orleans Saints, 31st in the NFL when it comes to passing yards. Not only are they 31st in the NFL when it comes to passing yards, they're at the bottom of the league right now, 32nd in terms of passing attempts. Imagine that. If you don't throw the ball as much as the other teams in the NFL, you're not going to have as many yards. So not a big surprise there. Now, their net yards per average put them at 20th in the NFL. That's right around where you would expect them to be as a team that leans on the run game quite a bit and doesn't pass as much. Net yards per attempt, or basically the average yards per attempt of all of your passing plays, but you're also subtracting things like sacks, for instance, that take some of that yardage away. So that's the way that you get net yards per attempt. It's a good metric to look at. The Saints right now, 6.6 on the defensive side, allowing 6.5, which is 16th in the NFL. So the Saints aren't really far removed from the middle of the pack there. Now, the New Orleans Saints, although they are 31st in the NFL when it comes to passing yards, 32nd in passing attempts, they're top 5 in passing touchdowns with 12, all 12 of those touchdowns being thrown by quarterback Jameis Winston. So they have been outstanding there, 21st in the NFL when it comes to interceptions as well. They've got 4 only. One of those thrown by Taysom Hill, 3 thrown by Jameis Winston. So the Saints in a really good place right now, sitting on a 3-to-1 passing touchdown to interception ratio. And even though they're not racking up a ton of yards, they're racking up points, top 5 in the NFL in the passing game. Now let's look over in the run game here. The Saints, a little bit more of what you would expect to see here from a New Orleans Saints offense. 10th in terms of rushing yards in the NFL, 11th in terms of rushing touchdowns, and on yards per attempt, they are 18th in the NFL, 4th in the NFL when it comes to most rushing attempts, 156 total. So the Saints, 4th in the NFL, top 5 in rushing attempts, bottom of the league in passing attempts. This is where I think you might see the New Orleans Saints offense change a bit after the bye, but we'll talk about that more here in just a moment. So that's where the Saints rank right now on the offensive side. Let's look at those same metrics, but over on the defensive side. Right now, the Saints 24th in the NFL when it comes to passing yardage allowed. So they're not necessarily great there, but it's exactly like what you're seeing over in the offensive side. They're 24th in terms of passing yards allowed, but they're 2nd in the NFL with passing touchdowns allowed with only 5. And a lot of this has to do with their red zone defense. Remember, the Saints only allowing red zone scores a handful of times over the course of their 14 red zone defensive possessions, just over 33%. They've been phenomenal in the red zone so far on both sides of the ball. In fact, over 90% scoring on that side, 13 of 14 on those red zone possessions when it comes to touchdowns. So the Saints have been outstanding in limiting scoring, but haven't been worried, but the indication that might come with a defense that's allowing a lot of passing yards isn't showing up on the scoreboard, if that makes sense. Again, not necessarily worried about the yardage, more so concerned about where they are in scoring on both sides of the ball. They're also fantastic right now in takeaways, the second most interceptions in the NFL with 9 so far this season. So they've been great there. Now, on the defensive side in the passing game, the one place you haven't seen the production that you're accustomed to seeing from the Saints has been when it comes to the pass rush. Second lowest in the NFL when it comes to sacks. They're 31st in the NFL there. Second lowest in the NFL when it comes to pass rush win rate. But we'll talk more about the pass rush here in a moment as well. When it comes to their rushing defense, it's kind of status quo for the New Orleans Saints. They've allowed only 4 rushing touchdowns so far. That is top 10 in the NFL. They've allowed only 395 rushing yards. That is 4th in the NFL. Top 5 when it comes to rushing defense. And they're second when it comes to yards allowed per carry, which is only 3.3. Remember, 4.0 is about what you're shooting for as an offense. The Saints right now, that puts you right in the middle. The Saints are exactly at that number, 4.0, and they're 18th in the NFL. That's what you expect to have from an average rushing offense. When it comes to yardage, the Saints right now holding their opponents to one of the absolute worst in the NFL at that rate at 3.3. They've been outstanding there. So that's the product that the Saints have put on the field so far on the offensive and defensive sides. Now let's talk a little bit about where things move forward for this team. We have an idea now of where they sit across the NFL, but how do they improve after the bye week, and how do players coming back from injury factor into that? We'll talk about that as we continue on with today's episode. And nobody knows more about improving what it is that you already have than rockauto.com, who help you improve what you already have in your vehicle. They make sure that you have all the parts, pieces, and accessories that you need for whatever make, model, or year you might have. They have an expansive catalog that's super easy to search. You just drop in that make, year, and model, let them know what part, piece, or accessory you need, and they're going to give you several options that you can find over at the brick and mortar stores, but you're buying them directly from the manufacturer, so the prices are much cheaper. You cut out the middleman, and therefore you cut your savings down as well, and end up saving a ton of money with rockauto.com. I use them all the time. I've used them for brake pads. I've used them for floor mats. I've used them for windshield wiper blades, not just the full windshield wiper accessory, but just the blades, the foam part that you can slide off and slide on. Saves you a ton of money when you're having to replace those, especially in the rainy months like we're getting to here and like we've been going through in New Orleans. So there's a ton of opportunity here for you at rockauto.com to be able to improve your vehicle. Go and check them out, and don't forget to let them know that Locked On sent you by writing Locked On in the How'd You Hear About Us section. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, and all the parts your car will ever need at rockauto.com. All right, family, it's Locked On Saints. Thanks again, as always, for making us your first listen of the day every day. Just a reminder, we're free and available for you on all platforms, including on YouTube. Hi, hello, what's up? I like to do that every time that I mention that I'm on YouTube. All right, so I want to continue on with our conversation about where the New Orleans Saints have been so far this season by taking a look now at where they can head this season. And now this is kind of before we get into the conversation around players coming back and how those players change the fabric of this team. There are things that this team, as it currently sits, can actually get better at moving forward throughout the season that will help them in terms of their ability to win games moving forward. Because we can't expect every single one of these players, guys like Quan Alexander and David Onyemata and Marcus Davenport on the defensive side, all coming back for week 7. In fact, we already know David Onyemata won't be back until week 8 at the absolute earliest because he has to serve a 6-game suspension, not a 6-week suspension. So he's actually not available until after that 6th game of the season against Seattle. And then on the offensive side, maybe Michael Thomas and Tre'Quan Smith come back against Seattle as they're eligible, but maybe they don't. And even if they do, there is going to be sort of an adjustment period in time for everybody to get into rhythm as this offense and defense kind of get back to full strength. So while that's happening, where are the places where the New Orleans Saints can continue to get better and continue to improve based upon what they've done over the course of the first 5 games? Now, we've seen the passing plays tick up for the New Orleans Saints going up against the New York Giants, going up against the Washington football team. We've watched Jameis Winston's attempts rise. He got up to 30 up against the Washington football team, and I think that's where they're probably going to want to keep him around the rest of the season, 30 to 35, unless they get into an absolute shootout and have to throw the ball more than that. But there has been a big time discrepancy in terms of how often teams are throwing against the New Orleans Saints versus how many times the Saints are throwing against the teams that they're going up against. You look at the passing attempts for the Saints, 120 in terms of how many they've thrown, 205 when it comes to how many times they've been thrown against. That's a big time discrepancy. And where that also leads with the Saints not throwing the ball as much. Remember, they're 32nd, they're last in the NFL in terms of passing attempts, but they're in the top 5 when it comes to rushing attempts. Some of that can be seen in some of these other sort of metrics that we can look at for the Saints. Right now, their average the average amount of plays per drive is last in the NFL. So their average amount of possessions are very short. Or excuse me, they're not last, they're 30th. They'd be last in the NBA. They're third to last in the NFL, excuse me. But they're running about 5.16 plays per drive, possessing the ball for about 2 minutes and 41 seconds per drive. That's 25th in the NFL. So if they're throwing the ball, converting more first downs, all of that, then that allows them to extend some of their possessions. We've seen them be able to do that, right? They've had these 10, 13, 15 play drives, but they're more sporadic than the 3 and outs that this team has produced so far throughout the season. Right now, they've converted 86 first downs total, not just in the passing game. Not just in the passing game, but also in the run game. That is 27th in the NFL there, and they're only allowing 105 first downs, 17th in the NFL. So they've done well when it comes to all of that, but you'd like to see them extend some of their drives, pick up more of those first downs, take up more time off the clock, and put together longer drives. That has been a big part of what the New Orleans Saints haven't done so far this season, but there's kind of a reason for it as well that is actually on the good side. The Saints' average starting field position so far this season is their own 32.4 yard line. So their own 32-yard line. That's the second best in the NFL. That's a huge deal because they're traversing less of the field than their opponents, than the rest of the NFL effectively. So that could also explain why you're seeing fewer yards per drive, fewer plays per drive, a lower time of possession per drive. Remember, the Saints got massively outrun when it came to time of possession against the Washington football team, and they still won by 11 points. So not all of this is doom and gloom, but it is something you would like to see them be more consistent at in terms of developing longer drives. Now, if they keep getting these quick strike touchdowns like we saw in the Hail Mary, like we saw in the 72-yard touchdown to Deontay Harris, which was Jameis Winston's longest touchdown pass of his career, obviously you'll take those. But in terms of the longevity of this team and in continuing to be able to put together winning outings week in and week out, you're not going to always be able to rely on the splash plays. In fact, you don't want to rely on just the splash plays. You want to put together some of these lengthy drives and dominate the opponent in front of you. We've seen the Saints do it here and there. Now we would look to see if they can do it more consistently moving forward throughout the rest of the season. So if we want to talk about where the New Orleans Saints can get better on the defensive side, it's hard not to talk about getting healthy and getting certain players back. And we'll talk about that more in detail here in just a moment. But you look at how opposing teams are game planning against the Saints pass rush in particular, which is probably the place where the Saints defense can improve the most. Second to last in the NFL when it comes to sacks with only 8. Second to last in the NFL with a pass rush win rate, which is only 32% for the Saints right now. It's 31st in the NFL. It's not great for them on the defensive line right now in terms of generating pressure. Now, they've done great in a run game, as we talked about in the first segment, but where are they and how are they going to continue to improve this defense and this pressure when it comes to the pass rush? It is going to come down to some of these players coming back because the Saints don't tend to try to manufacture pressure with the blitz. They can, but it's a little bit tougher to do that. They send 4 for the most part, sometimes 5. Demario Davis is a key edge rusher, or not edge rusher, excuse me, but pass rusher for him. He's a great pressure player for the New Orleans Saints. He put 5 pressures on Taylor Heineke last week and only 7 pass rushing snaps. It's an incredible clip. So he's been fantastic, but the Saints have only blitzed 45.26% of the time. That's bottom of the NFL so far. So they're not trying to manufacture that kind of pressure. You send those blitzers, you're leaving and vacating zones in the all over the passing game, things like that. That's something that they don't generally like to do. They like to blitz on third down and make it tough for quarterbacks to make decisions. But when it comes down to where they blitz, they're bottom of the NFL so far in terms of in terms of blitz percentage. And that's not new. Like the Saints are just not one of those blitzing teams like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers who have that nice 69.71% that leads the NFL in terms of how often they send the blitzes. So it does come down to getting healthier on the defensive line and on the defense for the New Orleans Saints in terms of where they can improve there. So let's dig a little bit deeper into that. We'll talk about the return of some key players and how they impact where the New Orleans Saints have been and where they're headed throughout the rest of this 2021 NFL season that has proven to be a very exciting season so far for the Saints and a very exciting season indeed when it comes to protein bars. I don't know about y'all, but it's protein bar season for me. I'm trying to get right. You know what I'm saying? And so I love my protein bars, but I also love my sweets. And Built Bar, the best tasting protein bar on the market, helps me get the best of both worlds. 17, 18 grams of protein, but only 4 or 5 grams of sugar, even though they have some incredible flavors, including coconut, coconut almond, German chocolate, if you're like me and you love coconut. They also have a bunch of limited edition flavors that come through all the time. Apple Almond Crisp was just there. These limited edition flavors do go fast, though. So if you want to keep up with those, as well as the other staple flavors like mint brownie, peanut butter brownie, salted caramel, cookies and cream, for instance, love the sweet tooth flavors like those. You can check out BuiltBar.com. And when you get there and you pick up your box, I would highly recommend a sample box. You can try 2 of each of the 9 standard flavors. Figure out which ones are your favorite, then come back for a build your own box where you can pick up to 3 flavors that way. Don't forget to use the promo code LOCKED15, LOCKED15, so you can get 15% off of your first order or your next order. Doesn't matter. 15% off with the promo code LOCKED15 at BuiltBar.com. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. Wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Saints with a quick look at how injured players coming back help the specific positions where we think that the New Orleans Saints could get better. Now, remember, we talked about extending drives on the offensive side. On the defensive side, we talked about bolstering the pass rush. Now, in tomorrow's episode, we're going to take a look at 3 key players that will return. There's going to be a little bit of overlap, but we'll go way more in depth per each player over there. And I have a surprise player for you there too. But let's talk about some of the obvious names that are going to help to bolster the Saints in those exact elements where we talked about. On the offensive side, when it comes to breaking down and taking a look at extending drives, then obviously getting your pass catchers back is a huge deal, but so is getting those pieces back on your offensive line. Eric McCoy has been out since like the 5th snap of the opening game, week 1. We've seen Teron Armstead end up with an injury earlier on in the season as well, which gives him an opportunity to come back. The original timeline was set to be 3 to 6 weeks, so he should be sometime soon after the bye week. Again, not going to get all of these pieces back against Seattle. That's just not going to be the case. But you'll start to see this team get healthier and get back together over the course of the first few games following that bye week. So you have those 2 players on the offensive line. You have, of course, a guy like Michael Thomas, a guy like Tre'Quan Smith, who can come back and be pass catchers for you as well. Those are probably the most important players to come back. Nick Vannett does play a specific role, though, so I don't want to leave him out. But of course, we'll talk about him as we continue on. But when it comes to extending drives, getting players like Michael Thomas and Tre'Quan Smith, they give you a big boost in the passing game, which allows you to extend some of those drives. You can pick up those rough and tough 3rd downs, 3rd and shorts. You can get yourself in position for those 3rd and shorts with wins on 1st and 2nd down, which we've seen the Saints struggle with a little bit, winning on early downs so far this season. He gives you all of that in just Michael Thomas, honestly. I mean, you look at the New Orleans Saints so far in the passing game, they only have 2 players that have been targeted more than 20 times. Marquez Callaway, who's been targeted 21 times, and then Alvin Kamara at the top there, who's been targeted 22 times. And your best catch percentage between the 2, it's actually Alvin Kamara, 68.2% though. You look at Michael Thomas, who you would absolutely imagine would have been targeted more than 22 times if he were healthy and available to get started at the beginning of the season heading into this bye week. Throughout his entire career, he's caught 77.6% of his passes. So he gives you the opportunity there to be able to target him on early downs. He's got a career average of 11.7 yards per reception. So you can pretty safely and conservatively say he can get you 6 or 7 yards on 1st down or 6 or 7 yards on 2nd down. We've broken down in previous episodes that the Saints have not been very successful on 2nd and long, and they've oftentimes gone to the run game in 2nd and long, where they've been averaging like 2.44 yards per carry on 2nd and 10, 0.60 yards on 2nd and 9. It has not been great for them when they get behind the count. You want to get a successful play, which is usually designated around 3 or 4 yards, particularly in the passing game or in the run game, honestly, on 1st down. Michael Thomas gives you almost an automatic 6 to 7 whenever it is that you go to him with his quick passing game, whether it be the slants that people love to talk about but still can't stop, the out routes, the in routes, the over routes, the other pieces that he's able to run to where you can get him the ball quickly right off of the snap. That also alleviates some of the pressure off of the quarterback and gives you a quick passing game back, which the Saints haven't really taken much advantage of so far this season. So Michael Thomas, of course, gives you a big benefit when it comes to specifically that idea of extending drives, winning early on 1st and 2nd downs, and giving yourself more 3rd and manageable downs, which help you, again, extend those drives. We'll talk about the massive impact that he has in returning in tomorrow's episode when we look at him as a key contributor ready to come back. But I mean, you look at what he brings you in terms of extending drives, obviously he's massive value there. So now before we jump to the defensive side, I want to talk about somebody that we're not really talking about very much when it comes to the return and how they can help. So, but this specific area of winning on early downs and extending drives, Nick Vannett is somebody that actually I think is going to play a little bit of an underrated role in his return. And it might not even be about what Nick Vannett himself does. It's about what he opens up Adam Troutman to do. as I've said before, I think the expectations around Adam Troutman being a big superstar this year was a little bit unfounded and a little bit unfair. But he has been a bit of a disappointment, quote unquote. I don't think so. He's about what I expected, but he's been a little bit of a disappointment for a lot of fans. But it's not entirely down to just his production. He's got one drop so far this season. He's only been targeted about 10 times. But when you look at what it is that he has been asked to do in this offense, it's not be a pass catcher. The guy's been on the field for 212 snaps so far this season. He's run less than 80 routes. He spent most of his time, over 50% of that time, as an inline true Y blocker. He's been playing the blocking tight end role. Nick Vannett can come in and take that role as a veteran pass blocker, veteran run blocker from that position, and potentially open Adam Troutman to be a little bit more of maybe what we anticipated him to be. Somebody that doesn't have to line up in line, that instead can line up, not so tight to the line of scrimmage. He can line up in the slot. They can move him out wide. They could treat him more like a split end than a tight end, which should allow him to get more involved in the passing game. And that could, because we know how much Jameis Winston loves throwing to tight ends, give him an opportunity to raise his value a little bit in terms of what he's able to bring to this team, not only specifically within the idea of elongating drives, but also just giving him an opportunity to become a more sort of valuable piece and a more utilized piece of this offense as these pieces and players start to return. Let's flip the page over to the defensive side, specifically talk about the pass rush here. But David Onyemata, we know, is somebody that brings a ton of value back to this team. He's a fantastic run stopper. He's a fantastic pressure player, but he's gonna demand a lot of attention from opposing offensive lines. So those double teams over on the edges start to go away a little bit when you've got David Onyemata there, because it gives you the opportunity to force an offensive line to make a choice. Do we let these talented young pass rushers, as well as the wily veteran pass rusher in Cam Jordan, be able to, win their one-on-ones, which we've seen evidence that they can do so far this season? Or do we allow the one-on-one to be matched up with David Onyemata, who can get immediate pressure up the middle? Remember, any pressure up the interior is more immediate than pressure off the edge. Now, there are times where an edge player wins immediately and then is able to get in on the inside of their tackle and then be able to get directly to the quarterback. But interior pressure disrupts in a way that is very immediate as compared to what you see from the edge rushers. So I think you're going to see a little bit more attention in terms of those double teams turn into ace blocks, or the center and guard double teaming a defensive tackle, as opposed to duo blocks, which is what we've seen so far this season, with a lot of guards and tackles double teaming the defensive ends, or a tight end also double teaming as well. So I think you're going to see some of those opportunities start to free up for the edge rushers as David Onyemata demands more attention. And of course, more injuries, more players coming back from injury help to make that happen. Marcus Davenport, for instance, of course, is obviously going to give you a boost in the pass rush. He actually looked really good to open up the season, then unfortunately ended up with another injury. And so he hasn't been able to be out there to capitalize on the momentum that he started to build early on in the season and throughout training camp. Getting Quan Alexander gives you the sideline to sideline linebacker that allows you to free up Demario Davis to be maybe a little bit more of a blitzer, because we've seen that he is extremely impactful as a pass rusher too. So I think that getting those players back on the defensive side, as we referenced before, that is what really, really helps you get this pass rush up and running again. And then as the pass rush gets up and running, the passing yardage starts to go down. Potentially the interceptions start to go up. Look at Caden Ellis as somebody that, forced that PJ Williams interception with his pressure. We saw the, I can't remember who got the pressure, but the Paulson Adebo's first interception against Aaron Rodgers was really due to pressure. I believe that was Cam Jordan. So you see the way that the symbiotic relationship between pass rush and coverage, pass rush and secondary, have already started to be of benefit to the New Orleans Saints now as they get healthier and then get pieces back. Remember, David Onyemata is not coming back from injury. He's just been suspended for 6 games. Then all of a sudden, you get a big time boost on that defensive side that ends up benefiting every player along that defense. All right, family. So that's a quick look at where the Saints are through the first 5 games or first quarter of the season and where they're headed next. In tomorrow's episode, we're going to take a look at 3 key returns for the New Orleans Saints. And we always got a little bit of lanyap for you in every episode too. So we'll talk about other returns. But Michael Thomas, David Onyemata, Will Lutz, these guys very important for the New Orleans Saints. Why are they so important? We'll talk about them and other players as the key returns episode comes through instead of our keys to victory before we enjoy the bye week. Got some great interviews coming up for you next week as we go through Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday with some pre-recorded episodes. Monday's going to be a mailbag episode. That is the wedding day, so I'm not going to be able to do an episode that day. So go ahead and drop me your questions for that mailbag. You can put them in YouTube comments. You can hit me up on Twitter at RossJacksonNola. However it is that you want to send them over to me. Thank you, as always, for making us your first listen here on the show. Now, for your second listen, go and check out the Peacock and Williamson NFL show. NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson give you everything that you need about the NFL in less than 30 minutes. And as always, for everything in between here on Locked On Saints, make sure you follow me on Twitter at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you're living. Let me know how you're momming them. And trust you, that nation. I'll holla at you.